And there are really four reasons why I developed the toolkit. I had got previously some information in a bit more split up way on the website, but I wanted to bring it together in one single format. So it's designed to support schools in England largely with licensing inspections. It brings together everything. So you as owners of riding establishments have got more responsibilities than just that under the Animal Welfare Act. You've got health and safety, employment, a whole range of things that you're responsible for. And then what I'm trying to do is develop some consistency and inspection standards, and then encourage some form of risk-based proportionate compliance. Now, I say risk-based and proportionate compliance. That's my view of it. Whether your licensing inspectors take the same view is another question entirely. And the system as it's currently designed has an individual who becomes your judge, jury, and executioner. And in some cases, the licensing inspectors are brilliant, they're helpful and pragmatic. In other cases, they are a bit of a challenge. And we'll come back to that in a moment. It covers all the licensing inspection requirements. I've got some stuff on horse welfare expectations. I covered some stuff on health and safety, employment, client, and staffing. So basically everything that you need to run a ride school, I've tried to give some understanding what the legal requirements placed on you are. When you look at it, and I'll show you it in a moment, I've tried to explain where the source of the requirements come from, what's expected of you, how you might meet it, and prompts, and then if I've got some relevant processes and procedures, I've linked them to I've given you a reference to where they are, and then there's some compliance, some stuff that you can do to track your own compliance. So that's what I've tried to do within the toolkit. On the council licensing side, I've covered welfare management systems, facilities and premises, horse care, record keeping, and emergency arrangements. In a rough round, that is exactly what the licensing requirements are in England. There are three core documents that you need to know in relation to the Animal Welfare Act. Again, this is English based. There's the deference to hiring out of horses licensing strategy guidance. New guidance was published on the 1st of June. And then there's a code of practice for welfare horses, ponies, donkeys, and the hybrids. And there's some RVCS stuff. Let me just show you that. I can find on my Google. Where are we? Okay, let's see if you can. I pass this over. I guess you probably don't see hiring out of horses, do you? I think I probably have to stop sharing for a second and reshare. So the core documents you need to be familiar are this one, the hiring out of horses licensing statutory guidance, dated the 1st of June. It's a DEFRA document. You need to read it through thoroughly. In fact, you need to be better versed in this document than your licensing inspector. All they can inspect you on is what's in this document. And I've been now to 2 or 3 inspections, and I find the licensing inspectors seem to ramp off and do all sorts of things and ask you all sorts of questions and ask for all sorts of paperwork that is not required by the licensing. The licensing is an animal welfare licensing inspection. It's nothing more. So you need to know what's in this document. You need to read it through really thoroughly and know better than the licensing inspector. But then there's the code of practice. This underpins the Animal Welfare Act. And in Scotland, there's another version of this, which is just being updated. Actually, I think it's going to be a better document. But this document is what's required by the Animal Welfare Act, and it sets out, all sorts of minimum standards. And this is all minimum standard stuff, by the way. It's not what I would hope, but it's all minimum standard. Again, if your licensing inspector says, for example, your field fencing is not right, well, you can go to this document and it'll tell you, what it should be. And then the last one is the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Animal Welfare Inspection. And again, they have a separate act that they work under. It's again a 1964 act, and these regulations were published in 2018. But this sets out what the council appointed vet will do, both during an interim inspection and in a routine inspection. And again, you need to read through this. This will say what's expected of you, but what he's not allowed to do is go beyond what's in this document, because that's not permitted. This is what the law requires. And again, I have come across vets who start to impose their own regulations that are not called up in this document. So those are the three core documents that you really should know about. Okay, let me just share the presentation again. So those three documents are your core documents that you need to be really, really familiar with. Under health and safety, we're now moving outside of what's animal licensing. You have responsibilities under health and safety, both under common law, actually. So it could be a common law issue about looking after the public, or it can be a legal requirement under Health and Safety at Work Act for looking after employees. You've got both of those you're impacted by. And so I'll show you a little bit about risk assessment, safe systems of work, equipment facilities, emergency procedures, and staff and client safety. Those are the kind of headings that you need to think about under health and safety. In employment and client, there's a couple of areas. Under employment, your main responsibilities are contracts, and under those contracts, your legal duties as employers, and around training and competence, and under welfare and supervision. That's if you're employing somebody. There's a bit of that rolls forward into volunteers as well. And under clients, you have some common law responsibilities for suitability to ride, safety information you give them, consent and declaration, and customer protection measures. So I'll go into that in a moment as well. I'll show you, I've put in a staff sufficiency calculator. So a lot of council inspectors will challenge you on whether you've got sufficient staff. I'll go through that, but what I'm looking at in that calculator is the number of horses, the number of competent staff you've got. I talk a bit about activities and high-risk horse, and then I can provide you with some sense of whether you've got enough staff to meet the requirements of the Animal Welfare Act. And so that's largely what I'll go through. The toolkit is an Excel spreadsheet. It's very simple. All you do is you go through, you check whether you comply, you identify gaps, you report corrective actions, you monitor completion, and then you can use it with your council licensing officer to say, look, I haven't skimmed around, I've done all of this. So that's what I'll show you. My key message really is nothing I'm going to show you today is pass or fail. And the problem about of all this legislation is that there isn't a pass fail. It's in the eye of the beholder. And in fact, the actual test is in law. It's called the man on the number 86 London Clapham omnibus, for God's sake. But that's the test. So what it really means is in UK law, whether you meet somebody or not, it depends whether you go to court or what your council licensing officer says. So there's no real prescription. But the toolkit hopefully will support you making your professional judgment. It'll encourage some improvement if you want to. You can use it to demonstrate compliance. And I've tried to design it around big and small riding schools. And then we'll come back and we'll talk with Kat a bit later about training. Okay. So I will show you the toolkit, but before I do that, any general questions, and I'll then show you the toolkit and how and really what it's about. How
I'll get my end ready to receive it now.
That code of practice, George, the DEFRA code of practice.
Yes.
That's new to me. I've not, whether it's got a different cover or whatever. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the other
So
two,
make a note, Vic.
but
Is
I,
it in colour?
Let me just put that on silent. Or mute. Uh, um, yeah. So the code of practice is the thing that underpins the Animal Welfare Act,
okay,
and so if ever you to be prosecuted for
right.
animal welfare offences, they
Yeah.
do it against the minimum standard. You will not met the minimum standard that's in the code of practice,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it's the underpinning document. Now, I have to say it's quite dated, and it really needs a damn good update to bring it up to the latest expected
Right.
welfare standard, which is what's gone on in Scotland. They're literally in the process of updating there, so it meets 5 domains,
Yeah.
and I suspect that will flow back to UK, back to the rest of England at some point in Wales. But it is the underpinning document.
Thank you.
And if you've got an argument and challenge with your council licensing officer, you can go back to that and says, look, the code of practice, this is what it says. This is what it says in the animal, and they shouldn't. I'm not saying they won't, but they shouldn't challenge you if it's what's written down in the code of practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, right. Let me just go and show you what I've done and this is really a summary of loads of different documents that I've put together over the years. I've summarized into a single Excel spreadsheet because I think this is actually more usable. So the spreadsheet has got an introduction, which tells you about how to use this toolkit. The summary, I'll show you in a moment what that means. And then I've got a number of tabs here at the bottom that are different parts. So there's a council licensing tab, there's a health and safety tab, there's an employment tab, and a client checklist. I'll come back to staff sufficiency in a moment. So let me just start off with the council licensing one and essentially just show you what it looks like. So the part is the part in the guidance material. So what I've done is I've literally taken every part of the council licensing guidance and I've put it into the spreadsheet. So what you've got is the part 1.1 is licensing display. 1.1 it's a base condition. The requirement in the guidance is a copy of your license must be clearly displayed in a public-facing area such as the entrance. I then put a little bit about how to comply. So display the current license clearly at the main public entrance so it's easy to see and easy to read on arrival. And then I've got a bit here, check the license. So this is for you to do. Check your license is current and legible. Check your license is positioned so it's easy for clients and public to see. And then what I've done is I've put some guidance material here. And then what I've got here is if I've actually got a template or a procedure on form, you'll find it written down in this column. And then finally, I've got a compliance rating. So if you go out and you say, okay, I've checked, my license is current, you can go comply. And if you decide it's not current, you can go non-compliant, and you can then write a little statement in here, I need to do this or I need to do that. So that eventually you'll end up with everything that's compliant. And I've done this all the way down. So every one of these is something that you should be complying with in accordance with the DEFRA regulations. And it goes down. I've got, where it says RCVS, what I've also done is I've added in things that were in the vet will look for, and sometimes they're the same. So, for example, staffing, both 4.2 in the council, in the DEFRA regulations, talks about staffing, but so does the RCVS requirement. So where they're duplicate, I've added them together, and it goes all the way down here. I've put in higher standards, and I've added right at the bottom everything extra that was from the vet requirements. So this is everything, and it's a long list that you should be looking to do if you're going for council licensing inspection. And I say each of this is a statutory requirement, how to comply, and prompts for you to think about the source of the material. And where I've put a link, if you click on that link, that will take you to some sort of guidance material that supports why I've said it. And then in this templates and plans, if there's something in here, that means there's something in the ABRS members area that covers this information. So you'll find there is something like there'll be, for example, here pasture management. You'll find there's a template pasture management plan in the members area, in the ABRS members area. So that's how this works. I said the other thing I'll show you is if you mark compliance rating green, and I say I go to the summary, you'll see I've got here 1 non-compliant, 1 compliant, and when you get those back to 0, you know you're fully compliant. So it's just a kind of checklist for you to use. So everything in here is to do with the Animal Welfare Act and your council license. I've done exactly the same process on health and safety. So if you go down here, the source is here, the Health and Safety Work Act. It says here, statutory requirement where 5 or more people are employed, written health and safety policy and clear arrangements are required. How to comply, do a written policy signed by a responsible person setting out a responsibilities commitment review process. Prompt is check your policy is current, signed, understood. By the way, where you see there's a little red bar, like here, I've put in some extra notes. So on this one, I've said risk assessments are a management tool to help a riding school understand risks and put the right controls in place. So where I've also think there's some additional guidance needed, and you'll see a little red corner, and I'll put something else in there. And again, on this side, it's done exactly the same. I've put all relevant documents that you'll find in the ABRS website are in here. By the way, you can use this. Let me just go back to council licensing. It doesn't stop you also writing in here. So you can write in here your own documents if you want to, and delete my documents. So you might decide you've got a different document. So just delete my reference, put your reference in. But eventually what you'll end up down here, I say everything written in here is in our website. But if you've got your own one and it's a different name, it can be done. Just write it in here so that you can show to the council everything that you've got as a policy or a procedure or whatever it is. You can show in here. So I've got health and safety. Health and safety covers everything from contractors, risk management, personal protective equipment, workplace health and safety, fire safety, first aid, RIDA, there'll be caution here, gas safety, provision of use of equipment, regulations, manual handling, safety signs. So everything that's to do with safety, I've tried to put in here, and I've tried to cover everything that you've got a legal responsibility. Let me just silence that one. I don't know where that was come from. Let's mute that one. Okay. There's then an employment one. If you're employing people, I've done exactly the same. I've tried to lay out everything I think you reasonably should know and do as an employer. It's not as long a list, but there's a lot of policies and procedures that are required if you're an employer. I've laid them all out in here. I've laid out how you comply, and then finally the same for clients. I've written down everything I think you should do. So it starts off licensing. You should have a valid license, displaying a license. Where it already is part of council licensing, I've graded out because you don't need to repeat it, but it's still a client requirement. The Children Act, so that's all about safeguarding, insurance, duty of care, again, some of this insurance is already in the council licensing. Duty of care, best practice, public liability, data protection, consumer law and fair trading, Quality Act, licensing guidance, personal protective equipment, and good practice consumer protection. So what I've tried to do is lay everything out again in here. So those 4 tabs could set out everything that you as a business owner and a riding school proprietor should have covered off in one or other way. Now, it's got to be proportionate, and so you need to be sensible about this. So if you're a very small riding school with 5 horses, it's different to one I've been talking today with 75 horses. Everything's got to be proportionate to the operation, and the law would expect that to be proportionate. So you can get away with a 1-page policy if you've got 4 horses and you're a very small operation, but you might need a full policy of 4 or 5 pages if you're a big riding school covering all sorts of other stuff. I said I put in a staff sufficiency calculator. I've put this in, and what I've tried to do is say the number, if you've got a certain number of horses and staff, how many competent staff, are there any high-risk horses, what's your activity level, and what it'll do is it'll tell you if really you've got enough staff or not to do the activity that you're doing. So that's the calculator. Now let me just stop sharing for a second. That's an awful lot to take in, and it probably looks a bit daunting. But what I've found, having come to a lot of inspections now, is the same types of things that proprietors maybe could make life easier for themselves with. So the first thing I'd always say is make sure you really have read through what the regulations require, because you need to know them as well as your licensing inspector, and don't have any fear about challenging them. If what they're asking you is not in the regulations, you can say no, or you can say, oh, that's very interesting. Can you show me where in the regulations that is? And I strongly suggest that it's worth you doing that, because I've found licensing officers making it up all the time. So know the regulations, be polite, but if there's something you know is not in the regulation, they're asking you to do it, challenge them with well, it's interesting, but can you show me which part of the regulations covers that? And often they'll back down. That's the first thing. The second thing is do a kind of pre-inspection. Don't leave it for the day. Really make sure that your staff are briefed, that you really have gone through. Get anything off site that you don't need. So in one of the schools I'm dealing with, they've got a lot of their own horses, and it confuses the licensing inspector. They've got another field miles away, and I get them to take their horses off site and leave just the licensed horses on site, so there's no confusion with the licensing inspector. So make sure that you keep it tight. Third one is, on one of the schools I've got, the owner is a very strong-willed character, and she will argue not in a very productive way with the licensing inspector. You need to be polite. You need to hold your fort, but don't be bloody minded. Is probably the next one. Okay. What are the licensing inspectors looking for? What are they being told to tighten up on? There are a number of things they've been asked to tighten up in the next round of council licensing inspections. The first thing they've been asked to tighten up on is everything to do with the horse welfare. So it's things like, has the vet signed your biosecurity plan? Is your biosecurity plan correct? Have you done a, a horse welfare management plan for your horses and has it by being signed off by the vet. So they're looking at those vet-like documents that support the welfare of your horse, and larger looking for them to be endorsed by your vet. So that's the first one. The second one they're going to tighten up on this year is training, which is why Kat's here today. You will all be hopefully level 3 in order to get your license. There is in the council licensing regulations a grandfather right type clause, but they are getting more difficult about it because the regulations have been in place since 2018. And their view is now people should be qualified. They shouldn't be sitting around on grandfather rights. So if you're a proprietor, you should be at level 3. And if you haven't got level 3, don't be surprised if they start putting you under a bit of pressure. There's still the grandfather rights still exist in the regulations, and they haven't taken away, but don't be surprised if you're put under pressure. The second thing is all your staff could be training to level 2. If they've got a horse care and welfare responsibility, they should be training at level 2. So they either should have a level 2 qualification or be training for one. And I'll get Kat to talk a bit about her level 2 qualification in a moment. But if you haven't got people, if you've got people with care and welfare responsibilities that are not level 2, don't be surprised if you could come under pressure again. And I think with Kat's offer, we have at least a easy way, a low friction, faster. It's probably not the total solution, but we've got a low friction solution, I think, for riding schools that will help. The third thing is they are looking for training plans for your staff. And by the way, they're looking for training plans for your horses, but they're looking for annual appraisals and training plans and evidence of CPD. If you've not evidenced any CPD, and it needs to be relevant CPD, if you've not evidenced any CPD, that's both you and your staff, then again, don't be surprised if you don't get a 5-star license because they've been told to tighten up on it. Now, CPD is pretty much anything you do. Coming on this webinar today is CPD. Log it. Put in your diary. There's no pointage thing in the council licensing regulations. You've just got to be able to demonstrate that you've done CPD, and that it's relevant. This is a relevant CPD, but they are tightening up on CPD greatly. So those are the 4 pieces I would recommend. So before I hand over to Kat and just talk a little bit about level 2 training, is there any questions on any of that? Just unmute and ask.
I've just got a very quick one, George. Sorry, it's something I noticed in the horse record keeping thing about having a backup. So a lot of us are using
EC Pro
systems and stuff now, not EC Pro, no, God no. But but those kind of systems. So realistically, does that mean we should just be going back to pen and paper and putting it in the diary like we do anyway? Or is it?
No. So a backup system means that you need to speak to whoever your electronic system provider is and say, how do you back up the data?
Okay.
So most people for example, Question Systems Jack, I know he's doing his on, I think, Google on a big Google server. They automatically have backup systems, and you're fine. I think EC Pro, I'm sure, are using Amazon server or one of these. So if they're on one of the big servers, it's straightforward. So that's all they're asking. And ideally, what you do is you have a little letter from your provider that says, "Oh yes, we have a backup system that puts all your data onto XYZ, and if we go down, don't worry, we can resurrect your data."
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I will mention it whilst I'm going through before I hand over to Kat. We've just introduced Pegasus, We've got 3 or 4 schools on it at the moment. So Pegasus is an equivalent to question systems, EC Pro and Hapote. I've introduced that because I was unhappy with the cost of systems. So I've worked with a chap called Max. He's a French chap in Normandy. In the continent, there's about 4 or 5 of these horse booking systems. So they cover staff, horse welfare, booking your lessons, client management. There's about 4 or 5 systems in France. In France, they don't pay more than €45 a month for these systems. So I've done a deal with Max. He's converted to English, and we're doing Pegasus at £45 a month. And I'll be doing a webinar on that at the end of the month. But if anybody's interested in a booking system that's an equivalent to the others, give me a shout and I can take you through it. I think Max has got quite a good system, and certainly it's a good system for the cost of it. One of my ride schools is using another company's system, and it's costing them £200 to £300 a month. And I just think that's just too much money. You shouldn't be paying that. Okay. Any other questions on? Sorry. By the way, you'll find all of that is sitting in the members area under riding school, under the riding school tab in the members area under council licensing. You'll find it all in there. If when you're doing a policy or procedure, so what I've done is I've gone through and I previously I had all the policy procedures in PDF, and all you need to do is write your name in. But most council licensing officers don't like templates. And so what I've done, and I've gone away from that, I've tried to go through and I've tried to replace all of the documents with Word documents with no heading, no branding on it at all. So you should be able to download most of my documents now in Word and adapt them for your needs. So what they're looking for is you put your own logo on it. You can go through and adapt it to your establishment. And I'm keeping them up to date. Most of them I've gone through pretty much all of them in the last 2 or 3 months. I've just redone all the employment ones because there's been some major changes in employment law. So they're all in there in Word in general. And if there's something you find that's in PDF and you want it in Word so you can change it, just tell me and I'll send it to you. No problem. Equally, if there's a policy in there if there's not a policy in there and you would like some help creating a policy to fit your circumstances, give me a ring. We can talk through what you want and I can easily produce a policy for you. And the reason I'm happy to do that is if you've got a need for a policy, I'm sure there's 200 other yards in the ABRS who also have got a need for it. So I don't mind producing